It's very nice to see everybody here. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Lauren Silver, and I'm the Vice President for Education at Commonwealth Club World Affairs of California. Thank you. Thank you. I'm very, very happy to welcome you to this program, which is the Spring 2025 installment of our ongoing Creating Citizens speaker series here at UC Berkeley, which is a collaboration with the ASUC Vote Coalition, which we founded, our two organizations founded together in 2022. So we've been going on for a little while, and it's been really a privilege. How many of you are not familiar with Commonwealth Club World Affairs? Okay, there's a few. We are the oldest and largest nonpartisan public affairs forum in the US, and we're located in San Francisco on the waterfront. Beautiful view, highly recommend that you come to visit us. Every year we host hundreds of programs with leaders and influencers in conversation about diverse topics ranging from politics to education, climate to social justice, entertainment, culture, and more. Creating Citizens is the Commonwealth Club World Affairs Civics Education Initiative. We build on foundational values of civility, mutual respect across divides, and informed civic action. We engage youth and adults in meaningful civil dialogue about contemporary issues so that we can all together be active and informed participants in our democracy. We offer lots of opportunities for students and educators and the general public, such as school programs, a youth advisory committee, intergenerational dialogues, discounted tickets and memberships, and lots more. And for those of you who are current Cal students, we also have an annual internship for college students, so I encourage you to check us out. We're very grateful to the Corrett Foundation for their generous support of Creating Citizens and for their dedication to improving the quality of civics education in California and beyond. So a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. First, we are recording this program for both video and audio. So I'm going to ask you to please take a moment to silence any watches or phones or other devices that might make noise that we would be able to hear on the recording. We also encourage you to ask questions of our speakers. We'll tell you when that time has come for questions. You can do this by writing your question on the card that was on your seat. One is being held up. Please write very clearly so that our moderator can read what you have written, so that's a better chance that your question might get asked. Hold up your card when it's ready, and we'll have somebody come to collect it. And now I am very happy to introduce Eva Escobedo. Eva's a senior here at Cal, studying history with a minor in global studies. She's passionate about the political relevance of history and hopes that by understanding history from new perspectives, young people will be more civically engaged and better equipped members of our society. For the past 2 years, Eva has been the executive producer of our speaker series. She currently serves as Deputy Director of Programs for the ASUC Vote Coalition, and she is our 2024 to 2025 Communications and Engagement Intern for Creating Citizens. So if you have any questions about the internship, you can ask her. Eva is amazing. It has truly been an honor and a privilege to have her on our team, and I am so excited that all of you will get to benefit tonight from the incredible work that she's done to put together tonight's program. So please join me in welcoming Eva, who will introduce our moderator.
Thank you, Lauren, and thank you to Creating Citizens and Commonwealth Club World Affairs for your partnership on today's program. I first want to take a moment to thank our co-sponsors for this event, the Institute of Governmental Studies, Institute of International Studies, and the Mario Savio Social Justice Program at the Public Service Center. We could not have planned this event without your help and your support. Like mentioned, my name is Eva Escobedo, and I'm the Deputy Director of Programs for the ASUC Vote Coalition, and also Lauren's intern for this year. We are so deeply grateful to the Commonwealth Club World Affairs for the endless support on this program and for their dedication to uplifting youth voices and civic engagement. So a little background on this. This program began as a late night idea by Alex Edgar, who was the former EAVP and Vote Coalition Director. He now is in DC doing great things. And I'm so honored to have been able to carry out this speaker series for the third semester and to have planned the sixth installment of this event. Our partnership with Commonwealth Club World Affairs of California is something that I am very eager for the next generation of leaders to carry on through this office. And this event has truly been one of the highlights of my time in the ASUC. So I look forward to seeing more of these events in the future. The topic of today's conversation is centered around the power we have to shape our political future. At a time with so much uncertainty, this event seeks to showcase how we can move towards our common goals, even when it feels like there are countless obstacles in the way. This is a call to action for individuals of all generations to reclaim their role in shaping democracy, and together we'll uncover strategies for sustaining motivation, reclaiming civic power, and shaping the political landscape that reflects our collective values. So our moderator for this event is Shannon Kim. Shannon is a third-year student at Berkeley studying political economy with a concentration in technology and society, currently serving as the vice president of the moderating committee at the Berkeley Forum. Her experience in public speaking ranges from museum docent tours to YouTube video essays to academic speaker panels. She is passionate about the inevitable intersection of individual action in politics, local communities, and collective arts. So at this time, I'd love to welcome Shannon and the rest of our speakers to the stage. Thank you.
To start off with introductions, Congressman Mark DeSaulnier proudly represents California's 10th Congressional District, which includes Contra Costa County and a part of Alameda County. For more than 30 years in public service and as a small business owner himself, Mark has been a leader for working families. And during his time in U.S. House, Mark passed more than 60 legislative efforts. He currently sits on the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure and the Committee on Education and Labor, where he serves as ranking member of the Subcommittee on Health, Employment, Labor, and Pensions. He was also appointed to the House Committee on Ethics, where he has the honor of working on a bipartisan basis to foster good government and promote accountability, transparency, and integrity throughout the House. His work is incredibly central to increasing trust in government among the American people. Mayor Adina Ishii is the first Asian American and first woman of color to serve as the mayor of Berkeley. Her professional experience is rooted in her work as a nonprofit consulting, collaborating with organizations on staff engagement and group facilitation. Mayor Ishii grew up in Southern California and was actively involved in the Japanese American community. Her identity as a Japanese, Chinese, and Indian American allowed her to learn about Asian American history, which instilled in her an incredibly strong sense of justice. And Mayor Ishii later moved to Berkeley and began her studies at Berkeley City College, where she became involved in politics, advocating against budget cuts to education. She would go on to become the youngest and first woman of color elected president of the League of Women Voters for Berkeley, Albany, and Emeryville, working from BCC to our very own UC Berkeley's Haas School of Business, and later graduated from Santa Clara University of Law. Now introducing Richmond City Council member Claudia Jimenez, is an architect from Columbia with a master's degree in environmental planning from UC Berkeley. Before moving to Richmond with her family in 2009, she worked as part of a team to design and build affordable housing and watershed management projects in Columbia. For the last 10 years, Claudia has been actively involved with Richmond and Contra Costa communities, organizing to ensure access to health, jobs, and services, especially for those most impacted by racial discrimination. In 2020, Claudia ran for Richmond City Council, promising to improve city services without going into debt. Her leadership helped the city get rid of credit swaps that wasted taxpayer money and increase city revenue by taxing large corporations at a higher rate. Last year, she was part of the ad hoc committee that got Chevron to agree to pay the city an additional $500 million in taxes over the next 10 years. With that being said, thank you to our panelists. It's a pleasure to have you all here tonight. Congressman DeSaulnier, I'd like to start off with your background, and you've served at nearly every level of government, from a local office in Concord to the U.S. Congress. Based on your experience in differing legislative power levels, what do you think young people should understand about how decisions get made in Congress versus local government?
I think one of the secrets to whatever success I've had in politics, I haven't stayed in one job very long. My predecessor, George Miller, who represented Contra Costa for 40 years, was chair of the Resources Committee and the Education Committee, is a good friend. He used to say, Mark can't keep a job in politics, so yuck, yuck. I think what I've learned is at every level, the similarities are sort of shocking in many ways. Shocking for the similarity, and then shocking for, as you move, the perspectives of your colleagues and their constituents, most alarmingly in the current Congress. Being in the California legislature in the state Senate was probably my favorite job, because you were one of 40 in that instance, one of 120. California has a very small per capita legislature, and the culture is so different. So when I first went to Congress, some of my staff who had represented actually a very liberal member from Boston before said, well, you've got all these bill ideas, but they're sort of crazy, you know, they're not going to go anywhere. And I said, well, if I'm at a town hall in the Bay Area, people will be mad at me if I say I didn't do it because it was a crazy idea. They said, well, that's what we sent you there for. So that's basically would be my brief. At every level you learn a little, and it's sort of the genius of the country is you start at the local level, and as Tip O'Neill said famously, all politics is local. So it's very similar, except for the scale, and your constituents reflect a very large country. Freudian slip, I said company. A very large country that right now is more polarized than just about any other time in history. Civil War, maybe exception, unfortunately.
And as you mentioned, as the demographic you represent gets larger, so does your methods of representation also need to change. And Mayor Ishii, you've also had a long-standing unique commitment to public service. And as the first Asian American woman to serve as Berkeley's mayor, how has your heritage influenced your own approach to civic engagement and empowering marginalized communities?
Yeah, well, you mentioned that in my bio about my history. I'm a Japanese, Chinese, Indian American, and a Japanese American history was a huge part of why I got involved in public service in the first place. As someone who really understands how the federal government has so much power and can sometimes use it for bad things, I was very aware of how important it was to be engaged in politics, to be aware, and also to make sure that we're speaking up when we're seeing something that's happening that's wrong. And I think it really does connect to, unfortunately, today's history. If US citizens back then and during World War II could be incarcerated without due process, and we're having the same situation now, what does that say when someone who is a legal permanent resident can be arrested and be in the process of deportation without due process? I mean, it's really a concern. I think it speaks to how important it is to use our own personal stories, especially when we have histories like my family does, to speak out when we're seeing things that are happening today.
And looking further into Voices to be Heard, Councilmember Jimenez, you started your advocacy career in Colombia simultaneously as both an immigrant and a mother. How do you address the unique challenges faced by immigrant communities in Richmond to ensure their civic participation?
Yeah, thank you so much, and I appreciate, this is great to be here with both of you. I am from Colombia, and I got here in 2007, and I didn't speak English at all. So I know in firsthand what are the barriers that immigrants face, just not being able to have speak the same language where you are going to live and relate to a country and the rules that this country has. So the perspective that I have is a perspective of a woman who was working with communities, with marginalized communities in Colombia, with small farmers in the Andes Mountains, where the Tom War was killing people, making them to be displaced. And here I see the displacement of people by the greedy that we have in this country, the accumulation of wealth in few that doesn't allow really to have a plenty life in one of the richest places in the world. Like, we are here in the Bay Area, and this is one of the richest places in the world, and we are facing all these things that developing countries are facing. So my perspective is just kind of like, every time that I go to Colombia and come back, or live here and I come back, so like, I always say like, oh damn, I am living in a really wealthy area, right? But we have like a lot of homelessness and a lot of like wealth gap. And I think like we need to talk about that. And in the immigrant community, when we talk about that in a way that relate to our backgrounds is important. And just finish with, I think like understanding and talking, as you say, about the history and the struggles, you connect in a more deeper level to the community, and then you can open up to really connect that with policies. But you cannot go and talk in the abstract of policies without really talking about what in the real life, daily life is affecting you. So I think like that is how I approach the participation, and have like understanding that we need to go beyond and have access. So for instance, like, it's not okay that we still have city council meetings without translation. When 40% in Richmond, 40% of the residents in Richmond are immigrant community. So just kind of like thinking ahead of like what is needed to have so people can have a participation that is real, and invite them to belong in this community is really important to me.
And building off of this, when trying to discuss such critical topics in your city, I find it incredibly important for the community to realize they have a voice and coming together through collective action. So, Congressman DeSaulnier, young people today are often at the forefront of such issues like climate change, education, and public health, like Councilwoman Jimenez mentioned. So from a legislative perspective, what are the most effective factors in determining whether an issue gains traction in Congress?
Well, not much gets traction in Congress. It's very frustrating. And I think a lot of that is the polarization accelerated when Citizens United became part of our political landscape. You can just see the trajectory when the Koch brothers network got the 5 votes they needed in the Supreme Court. So people are paralyzed, particularly on the Republican side, of working with us. I believe that a good friend is Virginia Fox. She's about as far right as I am the other way. She was the chair of the Education Committee. She's from North Carolina. And I always said, Virginia, you can't get elected in my district in the Bay Area. I can't get elected in your district in North Carolina. So how do we work together? So I've spent a lot of time with Republican colleagues. One of them is now the director of the CIA. He was the national security advisor before John Ratcliffe. And I finally said, John, if we're going to work on something with the idea of coming to a conclusion to take something to committee and the floor, I just want to know that this is real. And you get through all of this and they get to the end and they go, we can't do it. You don't understand my district. There'll be IEs against me explaining I worked with a progressive from San Francisco and I'll lose my primary. So trying to work with them, even when you're collegial, and I get really good relations. Virginia likes to say, she introduces me to new Republicans on the Education Committee, and she says, this is DeSaulnier, our favorite socialist from San Francisco. And I think, you know, I'm from the suburbs. But that's the biggest challenge. As I look back at going back and being in the minority, losing, we just saw that they are very lockstep. Because they know they'll be primaried with millions of dollars if they deviate from their master's directions. So it's very, very hard. And somehow that's got to change.
As you mentioned, in today's incredibly polarized climate, many young people, especially here at Berkeley, are frustrated by political gridlock. What do you think are the most effective ways for constituents to communicate their concerns to their elected representatives?
Well, I've done more town halls than any other member of Congress in the 11 years I've been there. I like physical town halls, but we always, let's see, I'm spacing, Kaylee. All the days are going by. A week ago, we did a town hall at St. Mary's in Moraga. We had 1,000 people in person, 800 people listening online, and we turned away 400 people. We've got a town hall in Concord tomorrow. We maxed out within 24 hours of sending the notice out. So the good news is people are very engaged, which I've always yearned for in the United States. And when we look at other developed countries and their participation rates, particularly amongst young people, I mean, the UK, they require you to vote. So there's lots of cultural but also policy decisions to incentivize people to be engaged. A lot of young people and older people think, particularly on a national level, what difference does it make? One vote won't make a difference. Well, we lost the House of Representatives by just over 7,000 votes in a country of 360 million people. So it's those areas. I think, I'm hopeful it will come back to a point, I'm constantly being told I'm naive and idealistic, where we can take our differences, be respectful and passionate about them, but still realize, like my relationship with my colleague, we've got to figure out ways to get work done. And we have, but it's very difficult when one party's going to get labeled for working with somebody on the other side in an IE with millions of dollars.
And now turning to Mayor Ishii, what strategies do you plan to implement in Berkeley to encourage continuous civic engagement beyond election cycles, especially among younger residents?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question. And as someone who got very involved in politics as a young person, I always want to see young people get involved. Whenever I'm in spaces where there are younger folks, and I'll say it now because I know there's some students here, we want to hear your voices. Your voices are so important. And, when I hear young people speak at city council meetings or when we get emails or letters from our younger constituents, we're really excited to see those, and we do listen. I want to make sure that we're doing more outreach in particular. We are going to have an internship program, which is really exciting. We've gotten a lot of applications, so definitely encourage folks to apply to that internship and also to spread the word about it, because we'll be accepting interns throughout my time. I just think it's really important to give younger people leadership opportunities. As you mentioned earlier, I was our youngest League of Women Voters president here in the Berkeley, Albany, Emeryville area. And just like when I ran for mayor, so many people told me, don't run, it's not your time yet, you don't know what you're doing. And, I won that race and I won this one, and here I am, one of our younger mayors. And the thing is, if I had listened to people who had told me, you're too young, you can't do it, I wouldn't be sitting here right now. And so we need to be able to encourage our young people to take and go forward in these positions of power, because look, even if you don't win, you've gained so much experience, you've built something that you can use for the future. You're going to learn along the way. I think that's really wonderful. I really want to encourage our commissioners to be younger folks as well. There are many opportunities to be heard in the city of Berkeley, not just reaching out to our city council through emails and phone calls and city council meetings, but also to sit on commissions, to join these internship programs, to look at also just we have so many positions in the city of Berkeley that we're looking to fill. If you're graduating, take a look at some of our jobs on our website. Those are really great ways to plug in to public service work in the community and really make a difference.
And looking back, during your tenure as president of the League of Women Voters, how did you engage youth in civic processes in your position then, and how are you continuing similar efforts as mayor now?
Yeah, I talked a little bit about our internship program that we're going to have in the mayor's office, but we also were working on forming an internship program when I was president of the League of Women Voters too. In fact, just on Sunday, I ran into one of our interns just like on the street, and it was so great to see her and to just see the work that she was doing. Not to say that the internship got her there, but just to say that it's something that she could put on her resume, some experience that I hope she got. And I know she's still very engaged in her communities where where she's living now. She was actually just visiting. Also, when I was at the League of Women Voters, I really brought this concept, which is now I think fairly common to folks, of diversity, equity, inclusion. And part of that is creating spaces where, again, young people feel that their voices are heard and valued, that they're actually at the table making decisions, and that we're removing any structural or systemic barriers that exist to prevent them from getting involved. Like, for instance, I heard earlier that the Commonwealth Club has some discounts for youth. That's really great, because that's something that we talked about and we did as well with our local league, is reducing the price for membership. Because I remember when I was a student at Cal, I was really struggling financially, and it was $75 at the time to join the League of Women Voters, and I'm like, how many meals could I have with $75? Like, that was the situation. That was like the place I was in my life. And if you have to make a student consider, am I going to eat or am I going to join this organization? Like, that's a problem. So what can you be doing? And I just also want to say this to all of you, no matter what field you're in, how are you thinking about engaging young people and removing those barriers to entry for them? That's something I think we should always be asking ourselves.
And removing barriers from entry just doesn't apply to just students. It applies to larger demographics of residents. And Claudia Jimenez, how do you address the challenges of engaging residents in Richmond who might feel disillusioned with the political process?
I think one of the things that I just kind of like thinking is you had to deliver. Because I think like people are disengaged because they see, like I vote for this, but nothing happened. And then show that to say like it happened and said, come with, like if you want some change, come with me, I open the door. So I have been working, with a lot of young folks who now ended up being, one of them ended up being my campaign manager. Now she is part of the steering committee of the Richmond Progressive Alliance, which is the political organization in Richmond that has been able to run progressive people that don't take any corporate money to fight the refinery town that had been led by Chevron for many, many years. Now it's not that way. And she now is getting ready in 4 years to run for city council, right? So, so the engagement needs to be in the look. This is great ringtone. Oh my God, I love it.
That was directed at me.
And I have my phone here because I am a mom and my kids are at home, so I need to be looking. But yeah, so it's just like delivering, showing that there is an space for them, and that the way that they can make difference is by pushing to be in the table and for pushing us to make a space for them to be in the decision-making process. We have several things we create before I ran and after George Floyd murder. We created the Reimagining Public Safety that was then created into a task force in the city of Richmond. And all these young folks were working really hard to say, this is the money that we want to take from the police to create this. And then I got elected. And people didn't believe that we were ready to have that big decision. And we took money from the police and created 500 youth jobs, created a community crisis response program, put money into on-house intervention, doubled the budget of the Office of Neighborhood Safety. And with that, in 2023, we were able to have the lowest homicide rate in Richmond in the history of Richmond. And it was the young folks working in the task force that put this decision and proposal on the table, and we were able to take it because the progressive leadership that we have in Richmond are not afraid of the political backlash to do the right thing. Mm-hmm. The same thing with May Polluters Pay. We were able to get Chevron to pay $550 million over the 10 years. And it was because it was creating an APEN, or like environmental organization, working with us. And we pushing because we are elected to serve the community, not serve the corporation. And this is why we don't accept money from even small businesses. Because we want to be able to say to the young folks, you are electing me, I am delivering from you, and this is my direction. And I don't take aside from that because this is, so just having that courage to show that to people, then people start to kind of like recognize that there is a space for them in the political arena.
Thank you for that. And to bring the dialogue back together, I'd like to ask you all some questions regarding opening up these spaces and how you see your leadership in that. But before then, we will be having a Q&A portion after this. So if you have a question for one or more of our speakers, please write it on the card to be collected shortly. And based on our conversation so far, it's clear that there's kind of a common thread of rebuilding trust in our institutions, especially in this polarized, unprecedented political climate. So this is open to everyone. Anyone can answer first. What measures do you see being implemented to build trust between local and federal governments and our youth communities that you serve?
I think it's just going to take, I'll be honest, time. And a lot of it is to the earlier question. We just had our retreat for the Democratic Caucus. We spent a lot of time on communication, but particularly for people under 45, the research shows that most of that group gets their information from technology, from social media, podcasts. My generation's over 45, they still rely on traditional network TV, New York Times. So it's how you build trust is also how people get information and how we all communicate. And trying to get people to understand we're a big country with very diverse opinions, and there have been parts of our history that haven't been very pleasant in our mythology and our aspirations. So we should be truthful about them. And your life experience, I have a dear friend who was a parole officer for years, Eizo Kobayashi, and he was interned during World War II. He tells a very sad story of he came back as a kid one day to where they were staying, and Dad was gone. And he goes, "Where's Pop?" And it turned out Dad had died of TB because not only were they there, but they didn't get any kind of medical services. So those kind of stories need to be told, and they need to be real life stories in order for us to understand that this challenge is not new in many ways. It's unfortunately, there's a reoccurring sort of challenge when you take a country this big and try to live up to the aspirations of we're going to take people from all over the world from different perspectives and blend them all together. And a lot of the research now shows that now that we're seeing elected bodies reflect all of the population just rather than white males, as I do. Congress has a way to go with that. The legislature in California's got a long way, but still a long way to go, that there's a friction there by people who would appear to be losing prestige and position, and they got to let go. It's Secretary Clinton's wonderful line, unfortunately, when she lost, was "we're better together." But there's a struggle to figure out with different parts of that recipe on making people understand. And we sort of, the culture of the Bay Area and certainly Berkeley, we're used to it and we understand it's better together. But the rest of the country doesn't see it that way. So that's, in building trust, that's part of it. And then lastly, one of the reasons I'm both challenged but proud to be the ranking Democrat on the Ethics Committee is we've got to tell people that trust in government's important. They have to believe that we at least aspire to virtue. We're human beings. But right now we have a culture where, and we certainly see that in this president, where you're a sucker if you're not breaking the laws. And we've got to change that in this culture. And the way to do that is to be honest about our past when we confront our future, in my opinion.
Yeah, communication, listening, accountability, transparency, I think these are the words that come to mind for me. Just as you were saying, I think it's really important that we're communicating to people what's going on because, even though I think that there are some that treat our American public like they're stupid. Actually, there are a lot of people who are like, look, this is funny. I don't know, this doesn't feel right to me. Something must be happening that I'm not getting the full picture of. People are aware when we have situations where some of our politicians are trying to kind of pull the wool over their eyes. And I think it is important that we hold the American people to a higher level of expectation, because if we assume that they're down here and then we're just like playing to the sort of lowest common denominator, if that makes sense. And I think listening is another big one. I think that that's how you build trust, is just coming to the table. I'm really grateful. I see the director of the Public Service Center here in the audience, and I just want to give a plug to say that the Public Service Center was really a place where I learned to come into meetings and say, hey, this is who I am, this is my story, this is where I'm coming from. And, you know, hearing others' stories and where they're coming from, and as a way to kind of build trust and relationships. And you should be able to do that not just in service work, but just in any kind of aspect of society, especially in politics. And then accountability and communication, you know, if we don't hold ourselves accountable, if we say, hey, we're gonna do this, but then we actually don't do anything, as you were mentioning earlier, of course people aren't gonna trust us. So that's really wrapped up in the transparency piece, which is like, what are we doing? What's going on? I think that, you know, oftentimes in the city of Berkeley, our city staff are so busy doing the actual work that they don't always have time to tell the public, this is what we're doing, this is this great project that passed, this is where it's at right now. And so I really see it also as part of my role as mayor to make sure that the public knows what awesome work our city staff are doing.
I think for me is also accountability and just deliver. Like if you don't build trust when you are just campaigning and talk about what you are doing, and when you get there, you don't do the things. Even though, and then the communication is, because sometimes you say like, I am going to do that, but like you are one vote out of many votes, but explaining what is happening. I just feel like I am really cynical about things, and the California, for instance, has a supermajority Democrat, and we are still not passing medical for all because there is no the votes. So how do you achieve accountability is by really choosing people who don't take money from corporations, because a lot of people in their votes are thinking about who they are accountable to with the money. And this is a mistake of having to have all these races to cost so much money, right? Because then you are accountable to the ones who give you the money to be able to run for any position. So trust also is about how in the difficult situation you are close to the people who are you represent. And I say that, for instance, when we put the ballot initiative to tax Chevron for their stock, like what they were going to refine. And then they started to throw money, like putting money at the table. First, they said $300 million. And we're like, no, we are going to the ballot. And then the next day, 2 days, 400 and 450. And my communication with our allies was like, I think like we need to start thinking about what is our bottom line, because this is going to be settled either here or after in court, because they are going to sue us. And that was a communication that I was like, I know that we want to have this ballot initiative because that could be a good thing to educate the community. But at the same time, it was like, are we going to have leave this money here and go for years into a legal battle, spending a lot of money? But that was, and people were like, oh, Claudia, but I was really honest. This is where I am. And give me your bottom line. And we were having this trust and really difficult communication with all the allies, all the residents, to be able to achieve what we achieve. So I think like also just really open the door to have the decision not in a closed room, but with many communities, so they understand that decisions get to be made in a collaboration and a back and forth, so we can achieve what we need to achieve together.
And as all three of you have discussed, it's clear that trust is an important prerequisite for agency. And we often talk about civic power in terms of voting, but as this conversation today has discussed, I think engagement goes far beyond election cycles and can branch out into so many different various ways. So to finish it off, what are some of the most impactful ways that you see reclaiming civic power can be redefined as, and what it looks like in your respective cities?
It's funny because you're talking about like reclaiming civic power, and we're all electeds, and so I guess for me the way that I see that question is like, how can we empower others and break down some of those barriers that I've been talking about, barriers to accessing our local government and decisions that happen here on local or other levels of government. For me, something that I think a lot about, and I mentioned it earlier, diversity, equity, inclusion. Again, like, it's funny, it went from being a buzzword to now being something we can't even talk about anymore, where the presidential administration is trying to get rid of DEI initiatives. And I see DEI as just something that should be woven in and essential in everything we're doing. And by that I mean, like, for instance, the city council meeting, if we don't have translation services, if we don't have captioning, if we don't have chairs, or if there isn't access for folks to come in virtually, and they're disabled and they can't leave their homes, like, what are we saying to our people? We're saying some of you matter more than others. Some of you, your voices don't matter here, that we don't care. And so, something that I'm always thinking about is how can we remove these barriers? Another thing I think a lot about is we live in a city where we've got a lot of students and then a lot of older adults. And so families oftentimes, I feel like, aren't being heard in our community. And if you think about our city council meetings, I'm very proud to say that most of them have been ending by 10 o'clock at night. But that's kind of late. And if it's a school night and you've got young kids, you can't be out at a city council meeting. We don't offer daycare. The League of Women Voters actually used to offer daycare for their meetings, which I thought was brilliant. And these are the kinds of things that I think we should be thinking about. How are we making, how are we thinking about who's in the room? How are we thinking about, making sure those voices are being heard and that we're removing those barriers, as I said?
I will say, as a community organizer, I think just to be able to get the community to really understand, or not understand, but like to get from the problem that they had to an issue and really work it through the venues that they had to pass policies is a great way of reclaiming that power. I remember as a community organizer in Contra Costa County, I work with a lot of undocumented immigrants and people coming home from incarceration. And we were having these meetings about like the fear that the community have, and I feel like we are coming back, like it's just kind of like we haven't advanced. I feel like we are just kind of like in circles. At that time, there was the Secure Communities program that was just like really deporting a lot of undocumented residents. And then there was the overcrowded of the prisons in California, and then they created the AB 109, which basically was like the overcrowded solution was, leave them in the jails in the county and we will send money. But we want to start recidivism, but the money was coming to the same institutions that are putting people in jail in the first place. So we worked together to kind of like say, well, this is the issue, like the problem that you have is that in the immigrant community, there is a lot of fear. And in the community that is come from incarceration, there is not that much resources. We worked together and we were able to have a huge campaign that it was called Invest in People, No Prison. And actually we were the first county in Contra Costa out of AB 109 that was able to redirect $5.2 million, taking it from the sheriff, DA, the same services that were not providing support to services that actually are data proven that is reducing recidivism. And at the same time, we were able to stop the collaboration that ICE was having with the sheriff, like the sheriff department in Contra Costa. And that was just kind of like something that like people saw in action, that like if we organize, if we are not only complaining and big with fear, but we organize and we kind of like put our minds into the solutions, then we can achieve things like we were able to achieve. And this is how I approach civic engagement. It's like how I put myself, like now that I am in the, like I was outside yelling at the city, at supervisor, saying like, you had to do this. Now I am inside and I am telling them like, you had to yell at me, like don't worry. And you don't have to yell at me because I am going to do it, because I am open the space actually for you to tell me, okay, what is the agenda item that what we are going to put? And I think like another thing that is really important that we need to build the muscle is co-governance. We are, like our movement are not ready to really co-govern with a city council or bodies of government that are progressive, that are telling, we had the votes. What are you going to do with that power? What are your innovation? Because I don't have all the answers. I am an architect. I went here to do environmental planning. I had some, but I don't have all the answers. So I am willing to work with everybody who we share values, we share intentions for how we want to move the city forward, to work together, to put that agenda item. So I vote yes on it.
All right. Thank you all so much for your responses, as we are very excited to see how your work will impact the Bay and beyond the Bay. And those were all the questions I had for you today, and we will be moving on to the Q&A. So if you had a question for one or more of our speakers and your card wasn't collected, please raise it in the air. And first, I believe this is addressing to all three of our speakers. How can we navigate at the better together approach when met with incredible bigotry and closed-mindedness? How can we address not only the spread of misinformation, but also the denial of truth, of science and reality?
Well, I have a bill that probably won't go anywhere. Kathy Castor from Florida, who's a wonderful colleague, has one as well. And it's just, I did one of the first tobacco labeling bills in the country when I was a city council member in Concord, and I owned a restaurant. And I look at that public health issue in California, how remarkable it was for people to remember, just telling people, if you smoke this product. So, and then we did it with liquor. I'd like to do our bill is similar for the internet, is just having a disclaimer there. We know from just had a remarkable couple of meetings with President Biden's the Surgeon General, and the work that they did at CDC, and how we're losing a generation, and information that we've been able to get through good journalism work, that a lot of these algorithms, particularly YouTube was the number one, they were directing at adolescent girls in a very targeted way, and it was leading to the CDC, part of the reason, but a significant part, the CDC discovering that the level of depression and attempted suicides and realized suicides in that cohort, which was large in the United States. So we've got to be aware of how people are getting information. It's much more sophisticated than any other time in human history, and it's much more directed, not just at parts of the country, it's directed at your chemical makeup in your brain. So it's an addiction, and this disinformation We were just laughing coming in here. Gabe, I think you and I were talking about it. I thought the Arab Spring was the beginning of this wonderful technology developed in the Bay Area that was going to liberate everybody. And unfortunately, there's been another side of that. So for us, trust and everything is education for people so they are prepared to discern the truth as best they can from lies. And then making proper, I mean, the EU has already done much of this. We're behind. So they've already recognized this, and they've got research that shows that it's working. So we've just got to be much more obvious and have proper constraints around the First Amendment. That I know, and that's a horrible thing to say, but it's restraints that are appropriate. And most of it is just providing information for people that this could be dangerous to your health. It could be dangerous to your kids' health. And then the last thing is Congress should take away the 390 section that Bernie Sanders has been so wonderful on, where that when the internet was starting, we protected, the Congress, before I got there, protected this new medium from liability laws. And they said, okay, when we get established, you can take it away. Well, surprise, surprise, they don't want it to be taken away. If you could go and do class action suits like the parents of these kids, there'd be a very different risk assessment from Facebook and Instagram and X, all of them. So that's something that Congress can only do, and we have to do. Sorry, I got on my high horse.
The congressman, do you mind if I answer
No,
that too?
please.
Yeah, the congressman mentioned earlier, like people think that you're naive because you think that we need to head in this direction where people are able to have conversations across differences. And my work really started, my political work started a lot with the League of Women Voters, which is of course nonpartisan. So we always say we don't support or oppose any parties or candidates. And that's really important because the League also has policy positions. And people are like, wait, climate change, isn't that like a Democrat talking point or something? And I'm like, no, it wasn't always like that. It's important to remember that on a lot of these issues, it doesn't need to be, Democrats or Republicans. And I think it's also important to remind folks that just because someone voted for a representative that thinks a certain thing doesn't mean that that individual agrees with everything that that person has said. And actually, when you have a conversation with a person about why they decided to vote for, whoever it was, Donald Trump, right? You might be surprised to find that actually they disagree on a lot of different issues. And so figuring out where we can align and how we can move forward together is actually, to me, what I see as part of the solution. I think part of the reason why there's so much division right now is because we're not willing to engage in those conversations, because we're coming from this place that, my side is right, your side is wrong, my side is, anti-bigotry and pro-science, and the other side doesn't believe that. And to me, one of the things that I also am trying to do as mayor is we have a lot of divisions even in our city, which is surprising for a lot of folks. They're like, Berkeley, super democratic city, and we must be aligned on everything. And if you've been to our city council member meetings, you know that that's not always the case. But cars versus bikes, landlords versus tenants, housing or not housing. And I've been really trying to say, okay, here's what folks are saying. Where can we meet in the middle on this? What is it we're actually trying to fight for at the end of the day? Are there places we can compromise and we can work together? And helping folks to see that maybe we're not as far apart as we think we are. I think that that's an essential role as mayor, is to find our common ground so that we can move forward together.
Thank you for that. And our next question is also for Mayor Ishii as well. In what ways do you hope to make the city government more transparent?
Yeah, so something that I have heard a lot recently is that our city website is very difficult to navigate. And so if you're looking for something, quite frankly, it can be easier to just Google what it is you're looking for, plus City of Berkeley. And that's kind of an issue. So that's one of the things that we're looking at. I myself am, our comms team, our comms director, has been creating a website for me so that I can make sure to get out as much information as possible. I studied business here at UC Berkeley, and I was really focused on marketing. And so I'm really focused on okay, how do we make sure the website information is accessible, not just from a disability standpoint, because that is important, but also making sure that the information is expressed in a really clear, concise way that doesn't use too many acronyms or jargon, so that people can get the information and understand what's going on. I'm really looking at other mediums in terms of video and through social media. There's just a lot that we can be doing. So I'm really glad for the question. Thank you.
And Congressman DeSaulnier, someone was curious about your transition in your career from Republican to Democrat.
I knew that would come up. You know, when I tell people under 40 that I used to be a Republican, there's a collective gasp from the room. And then I have to say, no, I was a liberal Republican. There used to be liberal Republicans. When I was 18 years old, this is going to date myself, I was growing up in Boston, Massachusetts, and I registered as a Republican because I wanted to vote for somebody named Edward Brooke, who was, some of you remember him, African-American, wonderful, and his counterpart was a young Ted Kennedy, and the argument in Boston was who was most liberal, Republican Ed Brooke, so that the party changed a lot of what we now know, and if you've read Jane Mayer's work on this, Dark Money, and all the wonderful things she's written about, this was a concentrated effort by the Koch brother network to go into Republican parties and change the party and drive it very far to their father's belief as the leader of the John Birch Society, which is what is happening right now in this country. They really believe that this country should just be survival of the fittest. There's little or no social contract. So when I saw that happening, and then when my colleagues on the Board of Supervisors, one of them you used to yell at, he's still there, my 4 colleagues were Democrats, and they made jokes about, well, DeSaulnier is the most liberal member of the board. You may remember this. So I was clearly in the wrong party. Some of you may remember there was a Republican senator from the Senate. I think maybe Bernie took Jim Jeffords' seat. And Jim Jeffords, when he left the Republican Party, had a great line. He said, "I didn't leave the Republican Party, it left me." Now, I will say there's a historic connection between some of our historic issues in the original sin, slavery. Generally, when Lyndon Johnson said with the Civil Rights Act, we've lost the South for a decade, he underestimated how long the Democratic Party would lose the South. And then Richard Nixon came in behind him and did the Republican strategy. So there's a national dynamic here that goes to our illnesses in this country. And I'm not to be, shame on you. It's just historical fact. So just like in individuals, people ask, good therapists will try to get to take therapy. I once told a Republican colleague from Alabama that, Brendan, what's his name? He's gone, but he shook his head and said, only a member from the San Francisco Bay Area would admit to go to therapy. And I said, yeah, but you guys from the South really need it. It's just the trust issues that you talked about in the institutions, we believe, while still being respectful, that people are going to have different, unique perspectives. So you've got to try to persuade others what your perspective is and try to understand what their perspective is. And for young people, I think that's really important.
I would argue that we all need therapy, and also
this country needs therapy.
Yes, and especially I think our elected officials. If I can just briefly touch on the fact that I think there are a lot of elected officials that really deal with some pretty serious mental health issues and depression, anxiety, and substance abuse. It's really quite shocking. So I think that that's important for everyone. I'm proud of you for doing that.
Actually,
and for sharing
I need it
that.
more now than ever. My therapist doesn't understand what's happening. I joked to her, I said, I'm going to send you a bill because this is like political therapy for you. And by the way, she's a graduate of this institution. So,
for the sake of time, this will be the last chosen audience Q&A question. And I find this one incredibly relevant, especially regarding the funding cuts and the protests on campus, if the students are aware. Budgets and finance always seem to be at the center of what programs and services get funded or cut. So what are you doing in your positions in each of your roles to educate your constituents about government budgets and how they are put together and work?
So for me, when I started in city council, my main thing was the budget, because the budget represents our values. So if you say that you value young folks, but less than 1% go to youth services. What are you talking about? So when I got there, and this is discussions that has been going about defunding the police, which I think is the wrong term for what we are doing, is that like 39 to 40% of the budget in Richmond was going to one department, the police. And then 20% was going to the fire department. So you have 40% of the budget to serve youth, seniors, families, clean the streets, pave the streets, clean the parks, renovate the city centers, and every other service that you can think of the city has is with 40%. And when you are starting to do that and then doing a really deep analysis, 40% of the 911 calls can be served much better with another professional than a sworn police. Then you start thinking like, what are the values that you have when you have a budget that is going to just one, like an important department. I am not saying that we don't need police, but when that much money goes to the department that punish, what are you telling your community that your values are, right? Public safety is more than just one department, it's everything. So talking about that with the community and just have this conversation, because in my block, my neighbor their car got stolen twice. Their house got broken several times. So just have this conversation about how we address all these issues and still have a budget that is really supporting the services. That is one thing. Just have this conversation about like, where is the budget? Like, and what is your values around that, right? What is? And be really transparent around that. The other thing was that I started to ask for the financial thing. So I was the first city council that I asked the city manager for the fund balance sheet. And they were like, what? And they didn't want it to tell me. And then I said, like, this is public information. And so I really work on guiding budget policies so that we have a more transparent way to present the budget in May when we start the budget discussion to approve the budget by June, and to have all this information and to just kind of like disclose it more. One of the things that I am really proud of is that in 2021, I just entered, we were presented with redoing a swap bonds. And these are predatory loans. And I said, no, we are not going into that. And thanks, we have a progressive city council that I didn't have to convince that much to have a second opinion. That second opinion give us so many information, but one of the things was that since 2005, the city of Richmond had paid over $66 million to the banks in termination fees for having swaps bonds. So we passed a policy saying we are not going to be in this swap. By just getting out of that, we saved $84 million to the city. We were upgraded twice in a year by Moody's. And now, just on Monday, we just have filed the lawsuit against Morgan Chase and the Bank of Canada and the fiduciary municipal advisors that were at that time for actually robbing the city. So but this is the thing, like if you don't go to this really detail and you are not willing to do that detailed analysis and be open to just kind of like said, you know what, the advisors, I don't believe that is the right thing, and challenge that despite of them saying, you had to do it. You had to do it because if not, you are going to miss the low credit rate that you are going to, and it's millions and millions of dollars, and you had to stand and say like, actually, you know what? Let's pause and let's have another opinion. So actually, Brad Miller, who was a congressman,
Oh yeah, sure.
he is the one working with me to bring forward this lawsuit. It's going to be one of the few in the country around this. And many municipalities, I will say, many municipalities have swap bonds, predatory loans, that has been just giving money to the banks, and it needs to be taken serious. And this is how I approach the work of the budget in the city of Richmond.
Well, first of all, you can tell what the current occupant of the White House's priorities really are when he fired the nonpartisan inspector generals. One of the first things he did, and then he gave control of looking at efficiencies in an analytical way to a very wealthy con man whose numbers are dropping. I love going to the Tesla dealership in Walnut Creek every Saturday. I'm sorry for the people who bought them, but. So this is a statement of values. One of the biggest things in the next year is they have to extend their one accomplishment from when they had control of both houses and the presidency. His first term was giving cuts to people who make over $7 million a year. So the top 0.1% of the population with, it's all, Reagan proved this, it's all trickle down. No, we learned from that experience, it doesn't trickle down. You can read Pickardie, Stiglitz, people with a lot of money keep it. And I liked Ayn Rand when I was a kid, but I didn't aspire to be like that. They really think they earned all this money from stealing it from other people. So they want to extend this tax cut to the wealthiest Americans that the Congressional Budget Office, which is nonpartisan, came back quickly and said, no, this is all staying largely in the top 5%. They all buy the same products. So they're trying to find a way to pay for it because they want to say that they're the party of fiscal responsibility, which is, by the way, not the truth. I have a chart that shows every administration for the last 20 years. The times it got balanced was Clinton, and all the closest times were when the Democrats were in charge. And by the way, their benefactors benefit from a deficit because they finance the deficit. So, so they want to what do they want to do? They want to cut health care for people who are poor, Medicaid. Another great advancement starting with Franklin Roosevelt and then Lyndon Johnson. If we cut Medicaid, we cut the whole, what is the worst health system of developed countries in the world. And that's a statement of their principles. So they want to take money from people's health care, who are the bottom third of the population, and give it to the top 1% in extended taxes. I have a picture that always gets a big rise the last couple of weeks at town halls. It's of the gentleman I mentioned, Elon Musk, Bezos, and Zuckerberg at He Who Shall Not Be Named inaugural. And they have more wealth than the bottom half of the United States. So 3 people have more wealth than 166 million people. It can't stay like that, and nor should it ever been like that. Sorry, I got on my high horse again.
But can I say something, and with all due respect, but like we have these Democrats saying yes to that budget. It's just like unbelievable that
I did not.
Yeah, no, I am not saying, but it's just like, look at like we need, like, I don't know, but I am really cynical about this, and I am really angry, and we should all be angry also with the Democratic Party that is not able to use the power and leverage that they have right now to say no, and let's shut it down. And how, like, we said that in the street, let's shut it down, right? Like, this is our chance, like, until we win, let's shut it down. And these Democrats, and it's in blue states, New York, a lot of the New York people, So it's like, this is what we have, and I'm sorry that I am venting, but I'm just so angry that we are fighting in the trenches here in these communities, trying to get like Chevron to pay fair taxes, trying to get better outcomes for our community, and then these Democrats are just being so, like, they sold us out with this. So I'm sorry.
He gets to say, I'm not one of them. I'm not part of that.
I just had to say, I'm sorry.
We only had one Democrat in the House who voted yes for that.
Well, so your question, just going back to your question really quickly, because I think I'm the last one. How are we making sure that the people know about budgets or the budget process? Yes. Okay, so the question was asked earlier about transparency, like how are we going to make things more transparent? And then this is a really great opportunity to do that. I'm kind of lucky because we have a 2-year budget cycle and I'm coming in the middle. And so a lot of those really hard decisions that had to get made last year, I don't have to do that, which actually is nice because I get a smoother transition, I think, into the process. But, you know, like I already said, I went to Haas and I look at our budgets and I'm like, what is happening here? Like, I know, I can read it, I understand, but my point is the average person is not going to be able to look at a budget and say, oh yeah, I can clearly say, you know, this grant and, you know, this revenue source is going over here. And I think that really impacts our transparency, right? Because just because something is able to be accessed doesn't mean that it's going to be understandable to people. And that is important when we talk about transparency. So, you know, as we're having these conversations, I'm also on our Budget and Finance Committee. We have committees in the city of Berkeley, and this is a really important one to ask those questions. Like, okay, we've passed these measures. Where is the funding actually going to? You know, where are we right now with these different projects? And making sure that the public really understands that. So I'm looking forward to that process and getting a better sense of you know, how we're doing, because I think many cities right now are dealing with a deficit. And what are we going to do about that? You know, what kind of tough decisions are we going to make, and how are we going to make sure that the public is involved in the process of what is going to get cut and what is going to stay? I think that's something that's really important to me, especially as a new mayor.
And I will say something, and because the budget is so important, it's like always challenge the assumptions, because sometimes the assumptions are made with a scarcity framework. And it doesn't need to be like that. So I always say, where like this projection, what are the assumptions? What are you thinking about? And sometimes it's like, are you kidding me? Like, you are not putting this there? Come on. So, and yeah, so elected officials challenge the assumptions, and people say, like, give me the back data so we understand where are these numbers coming up.
Great. Thank you so much for that. Can we get another round of applause for our panelists?
Yes, thank you.
And I will be handing it off to Ava now for concluding remarks.
Thank you so much to our speakers and our moderator for your amazing and thought-provoking discussion today. And thank you all so much for being here. I know it ran over late, so thank you for sticking around. And thank you again to Creating Citizens, Commonwealth Club World Affairs, and our sponsors. I hope everyone that came out tonight had a good time and learned something new. And remember that Commonwealth Club World Affairs has lots of other opportunities for students and educators, including free tickets and discounted memberships. And if you'd like to find out more, you can visit commonwealthclub.org/education and follow Creating Citizens on Instagram and LinkedIn. Recordings of today's program will be posted on the club's website. But that concludes today's program, and thank you so much to everyone for your participation and all of our audience members for coming out. So I hope you have a good rest of your night.